Dr. Philip Shetler Jones, Senior Research Fellow of Indo-Pacific Security at the RUSI think tank. Taiwan's democratically elected president has been sworn in, and he's called on China to stop its military intimidation against Taiwan. What does the Taiwan inauguration mean for the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I think it's an unwelcome reminder that Taiwan continues to have not just a democratic system of government separate from their own communist system, but also one which attracts quite a lot of credit for its high standards, really. It ranks very high in the Economist Intelligence Unit sort of annual measure of democratic performance. So from that point of view, it's always, I think, a source of some discomfort. In this case, probably there's an additional factor, which is the party which came out successfully from the recent election in January this year is perceived generally as the one with the more independence-minded set of policies. Although I would say one caveat to that is that they came out with a reduced majority, so that will make it a bit harder for them to get their policies through their parliament. And they came out with a lower rating than the predecessor government. So in some ways, the result could have been worse for Beijing, but nonetheless, the fact that Taiwan continues to elect its own leaders, really independent of Beijing's control, persists as one of the thorns in the side of the communist government in Beijing.
And in the coming year or so, could we see the Chinese Communist Party become more aggressive towards Taiwan?
I think what you've seen is stepping up of the kind of intimidation tactics. And I think that's the word that President Lai used in his inauguration speech today. For example, Chinese People's Liberation Army aircraft flying exercises close to the island, crossing the median line, which is a line roughly equidistant between the mainland and the Taiwan coast, which has formerly been seen as a sort of informal taboo, and really a more intimidating form of rhetoric. So formerly, there used to be a sense that as long as Taiwan didn't go as far as declaring independence formally, the use of force would not be required. But that's been changed recently. And so now the reminder has been made more often that the use of force is not off the table as a last resort at a point when the Communist Party feels that unification has become impossible. That's what they're prepared to do.
How is security in Taiwan significant to security in the rest of the world?
Well, in one sense, it's another crisis point, a bit like Ukraine, which reminds people that use of force to settle these kind of problems is something that countries will consider and put into effect. And I think that's something that people are always a bit uncomfortable about, because most countries have their own sort of disputes and problems with neighbors. And so there's a sense of what people have called the broken glass phenomenon, which is when you have these kind of things happening more often in other places, it might make it a bit more likely to happen to you. So there's a normative effect. On a more practical level, Taiwan is placed at the center of the global supply chain for components which are critical to the global economy, particularly semiconductors, microprocessors. And so that makes what happens to Taiwan of much higher importance to other countries than would be the case with other countries who are less plugged into the global supply chain.
Well, Philip Shetler Jones, Senior Research Fellow of Indo-Pacific Security at the RUSI think tank, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.